Okay. Uh, Evening, folks. So we'll pick up with chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot, and um, the next several Mishnayot that we're looking at are fairly like brief aphorisms, and with the exception really of the first one that we're going to look at, which is chapter 4, Mishnah 3. I think they seem to me at least fairly easy to understand and fairly easy to digest. And the first one did too, until I made the mistake of looking at Bartanura's commentary on it, and he understands it like in a radically different way that never even occurred to me before. So I will hit the share screen button and Chrome tab. Um, hmm. Doesn't want to share. Okay, now we got it. All right, so all right, so we're continuing with Ben Azai. We actually looked at we finished with Mishnah 2 a couple of weeks ago, where he said basically you should be as eager or as quick to do a minor mitzvah as a major mitzvah without like getting into how you define what's a minor mitzvah and what's a major mitzvah, because a, um, a, a a sin or a transgression causes, and actually the word gorer actually means like to pull, like actually in modern Hebrew, ligror is like a tow truck is a gorer. Okay, so that's what it means, like a tow truck like literally pulls the car behind it. And so a transgression pulls um pulls well, a mitzvah pulls behind it another mitzvah, a transgression pulls behind it another transgression, etc. Okay, so now Mishnah 3. Um, Hu Haya Omer, he used to say, Al Tehi Vaz Lechol Adam, do not despise any person. The Al Tehi Maflig Meflig Lechol Davar, do not discriminate against anything. Um, Maflig could also mean to like to push away something. She'ein lecha adam she'ein lo sha'ah, for there is no man that does not have his hour. There is no person that does not have their hour. Ve'ein lecha davar she'ein lo makom, and there is no thing that does not have its place. Okay, so um, what does this mean? What do you get out of this statement of Ben Azai, or what does it mean, or what do you think it means? Yeah, Toby.
that nobody's perfect, that everybody can make mistakes, and you have to consider that when you're judging somebody.
Right. I mean, yeah, right. I mean, don't despise anybody because you never know like when that person will have have their time that for whatever reason they will all of a sudden shine or be that's what it seems like it says to me. Yeah, Alan.
Two things. One, it reminds me of the quote attributed to Will Rogers that we're all ignorant, just on different subjects. Number one. And
Mm.
number two, I just get this sense of Ecclesiastes. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong. And I found it interesting for that.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I
I mean,
see. I see the E-class Ecclesiastes connection as well, especially in the last line. But there's no thing with its place in the sun, without its place in the sun.
well, all right. There just says that there's no thing without its place. It doesn't say,
Oh,
but right. Ecclesiastes says right. Ein chadash tachat
right.
hashamesh. Right there. There's nothing new under the sun.
Well,
Right. So
actually,
it does. I mean, it's interesting that you two guys are obviously much more like classy and literary than I am because um, what was it? There was that sort of cheap wine in the 70s, or right? We will sell no wine before it's time. I never remember was that. I don't think it was Gallo, but it might have been. Anyway, so that's what it reminded me of. But
the
um,
reason I mentioned in the sun is that's the Sim Shalom translation. So
right, no, that's what it says in Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the
yeah,
sun.
yeah.
But the Mishnah, the Safari Mishnah, doesn't doesn't say under the sun. I mean, the Hebrew doesn't say. All right.
Let's say Bashemesh or
Um, Ein lecha adam she'ein lo sha'ah. There is no person, right, that does not have their hour. The ein lecha davar she'ein lo makom, and there is no thing that doesn't have its place. The word shemesh doesn't appear uh, in this Mishnah. But here's so I like I say I don't know if I'm saying this like flippantly or not, frankly, but I looked at the Bartanura commentary on this, and Bartanura reads this wildly differently. Okay, it says Al tehevaz l'chol adam, right? Do not despise or belittle another person, saying, well, what harm can this person do to me? Okay, that's what it said. Say Barton, that's how Bartanur reads it, right? Don't like belittle another person saying this person does not have the capability to do me harm because any person under the right circumstances has the ability to do you harm. And um, do not discriminate against anything. Again, Bartanura reads this, do not like distance, but distance in the sense of saying it's remote. Basically, Bartanura says, do not say of any like conceivable bad thing that can occur that it's so unlikely to occur that I'm not worried about it because it's like it's you know, as the Wallace Shawn character in Princess Bride kept saying, it's inconceivable, right? it's like so remote, so unlikely that don't say that it couldn't possibly happen, because anything could happen. I'm not sure whether Bartanura, thinks that Ben Azai, um, you know, uh, that his profession was risk management, um, or whether Ben Azai thought up Murphy's law before Murphy did. Um, but and I'm not. Look, far be it from me to say that Bartanur's reading of this Mishnah is not correct. It's just not at all what occurred to me when I read the Mishnah, unaccompanied with any commentary. Um, Thoughts about that? Well, we got two lawyers here. Somebody must have something to say.
I mean,
Joe,
I don't-
go ahead.
I also see an element here of what goes around may come around. If you disdain other people, they may disdain you, and if you undervalue a thing and deny it its place in the sun, that could be turned against you as well.
Yeah, sure. Um, but I mean, look, the way I read it initially, basically is as a statement about the value of every person, right? And um, I mean, like Purim is coming, right? And um, Mordecai's statement to Esther, right? When Esther wants us to, I don't want to get involved. It's too risky, right? And what does Mordecai say to her? How do you know that it's not precisely for this time that you are in the position that you're in, right? And a couple of the speakers at this conference that I was at the last couple said the same thing. That in one way I believe this, in another way I don't, right? That we are alive at this time because this is our task, right? This is our task, right? The challenges that are facing our country and the challenges that are facing the world, right? Nobody else is going to fix them, right? The only people who are going to fix them are us, and that I do believe, right? But beyond that maybe that's why God has you alive right now, because that's right. That to me is a little bit too deterministic, but at any rate, right? That um I read this, and I think we all do, as a statement about the value and the worth and the dignity and the respect of every person. But Bartanura reads it really about the potential dangerousness of every person, right? Don't underestimate don't underestimate that schlepper, because that schlepper could really do you in if you're not careful. Yeah, Leslie.
I was thinking about why we are in the situation, why this whole political situation is happening now at this time. And it occurred to me that maybe this is the best time, because if it had to happen and it happens later on, then the young people, the people who are young now that would be managing that, don't necessarily have the historical perspective that we do about the wars and the Holocaust and I mean, because their whole mindset is
Right.
different, and they may not have been able to fight this off because they may not have even appreciated what it all meant. So when you said that about we were meant to be dealing with that, I was thinking maybe that's why God has us dealing with this now.
Right. I mean, like, like I've seen, and said myself, first they came for the immigrants and I spoke up because I read the rest of the damn poem, you know, and we are the last generation. I mean, look, some of you lived through the poem, others did not, others of us did not, right? But we all knew and knew well, relatives, friends of our parents, neighbors, Hebrew school teachers, bar mitzvah, whatever, who did really live through that poem, and that therefore we understand what can happen. Okay, and that therefore actually it's a way of dovetailing those two readings, right? Because you can't say, well, all right, uh, so we still have 9 of the amendments in the Bill of Rights left. Not too bad, right? We're not all right. So now only 8, but how bad can it really get? We've seen how bad it can get. And maybe not having that historical memory, I don't know, subsequent generation is not as well placed.
And with all the attempt to change history that they're doing, the younger people may grow up not knowing it because of that reason as well.
Sure. Yeah, very true, very true. Like, I know what I saw. I know what I lived through, right? And yeah, for sure. Okay. Any other thoughts on Mishnah 3? If not, we'll go on. Okay. All right, so Mishnah 4 is a very cheerful Mishnah. Rabbi Levitas Ish Yavna Omer, Rabbi Levitas, a man of Yavna, used to say, Ma'od Ma'od Havei Shval Ruach, be very, very humble in spirit, Shetikvat Enosh Rima, for the hope or the end, in other words, your destination, like what you're going to wind up with is the worm, right? Be humble, right? Because um, basically, rich or poor, learned or ignorant, smart or foolish, we all wind up in the same place, right? Worm food, right? So have some humility, right? I mean, obviously, not particularly cheerful, but nevertheless true, right? I mean, right? A more modern version of that same thought would be you can't take it with you, right? We're all going to the same place, right? Or like it says in the Yizkor service that we read on the holidays, right? I don't remember exactly, right? But all must walk the same path to the door of the grave, right? Um, and you're not going to escape that. Thoughts, questions on that? Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer, Koch HaMechalel Shem Shemayim Baseter Nifra'in Mimenu V'Galui. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan ben Brocha said, whoever profanes the name of heaven in secret, they punish him or they get it back from him. They requite it from him in public. Echad shogeg ve'echad mezid b'chilul Hashem. Unwittingly or wittingly, it is all one in profaning the name. Okay, so this I think requires a bit of unpacking, right? First of all, what is Chilul Hashem, right? Chilul Hashem, Chilul Shem Shemayim. And when it says Shemayim in text like this, which literally means heaven, it's a euphemism or another way of referring to God, right? So when it says you profane the name of heaven, it doesn't mean the name of heaven. You profane God's name, Chilul Hashem, right? But what is Chilul Hashem? Right, meaning profaning or desecrating the name of God. But I think it's a specific type of sin which brings Judaism into disrepute, right? Like, a rabbi or another person who is like publicly identified as a Jew, but maybe not just a Jew, but like a Jewish leader or a Jewish exemplar, and engages in extremely bad behavior, that would be Chilul Hashem, right? In other words, where people look at that person, either let's say a non-observant Jew who looks and says, well, if that's what Jewish observance is like, I want no part of it, right? Or a non-Jew and says, "Oh, those Jews, right? I don't want any I don't want any part of it." Okay, so it's not just a sin; it is like a type of sin that brings Judaism and therefore God, and that's why it's called desecrating God's name, right? Because we are supposed to be God's representatives, God's standard bearers, right? We're like Team God, right? Or like Jake and Elwood Blues, who were not Jewish, as far as I know, although they dressed like Hasidim, right? We're on a mission from God, right? And so that is Chilul Hashem, and I can give you a couple of examples that would never occur to you, that might never occur to you. Okay, like one is something that I have dealt with not infrequently in my career, and pretty much every rabbi who serves a congregation will deal with this. All right. So somebody's a convert, right? Somebody is a convert and their parent dies and they want to know about sitting Shiva, right? convert sitting Shiva for a parent, yes or no, why or why not? All right, Joe, you took the first
Oh.
step of unmuting, so
I was gonna say yes because they're Jewish.
all right. Well, yes, they are Jewish, but the
Parents
parent
are.
is not Jewish,
Right.
right? So this is the type of case where, let's say, black letter law leads you to a conclusion that in practice most rabbis certainly would not rule must be followed. Okay. Halachically, a convert is a new person, right? So that is why, your Hebrew name is not so and so Ben or Bat, your parents. It's so and so Ben or Bat Abraham Sarah, right? Because so legally, your parents are now not your biological parents. Legally, are no longer your parents. Legally, your parents are Abraham and Sarah. Okay, so if your parents are not your parents, then when they die, you don't sit Shiva for them. Okay, because they're not your parents. Okay, but that's not the way that we rule in practice. Okay, although I will tell you, my first pulpit in New York, a man who had converted, one of his parents died, and I organized, Shiva minyan in their house, and a couple of people in the congregation, apparently, I guess this had not been done before, but they were really angry with me. They said, "Oh, he's a convert. His parents aren't Jewish. Why do we have to have a Shiva minyan in his house?" Right, which surprised me a lot. But all right. So aside from the subjective reason, which Joe, you said, well, they're Jewish, right? And that is, to me, that is sufficient, right? Yes, your parent was not Jewish, but you are, and therefore you have an emotional need to mourn in the way that Jews mourn, right? But yeah, Leslie, go ahead.
There was a pope. I mean, not a pope. Well, he was a
Cardinal Lustiger, I know who you're thinking of. Yes.
okay.
Yeah, the Cardinal Archbishop of Paris. Yeah. Yeah, no, go on. I mean,
Oh, well, he found out that his parents were Jewish, and that I guess during the World War II or whatever, they pretended they weren't Jewish, or they sent him somewhere and he was raised as not Jewish, and he didn't know this until after I think he became a cardinal. And when he found that out, he went to his father's grave, even though he was a cardinal. He went to his father's grave and said Kaddish for him.
yeah, so that may be either a different person or whatever, because there's not I mean, there are other stories too. People
Oh,
who were hidden in monasteries or in convents or with Christian families who converted. In the case of Cardinal Lucier that I'm thinking of, I mean, his um, it was not a secret. I mean, but he went every year on the yard sites of his parents. He went to the liberal synagogue in Paris, not the Orthodox synagogue. He went to the liberal synagogue to say Kaddish. But when he died, actually, the chief rabbi of France said Kaddish for him. But the I mean, so there's the psychological need, but also there is this idea, and this is really where the Chilul Hashem comes in. So before you became Jewish, you respected your parents. But now that you are Jewish, you don't respect your parents anymore. What a wonderful religion Judaism is, right? Teaching you to disrespect your parents, right? And that's where the Hilul Hashem aspect comes in. Okay, and here's another one. Okay, and I will tell you that there are Orthodox rabbis who say no, you shouldn't follow that. And by the way, I mean, unlike, if somebody is a born Jew and they say, Rabbi, I don't know, I don't want to sit Shiva because I don't want to miss too much work. Do I have to sit Shiva? Right? I will say yes. Halachically, you have to sit Shiva. I am not the God cop. I cannot make you sit Shiva. But if you are asking me what the law is, this is the law, right? Whether you follow it or not, I can't enforce, right? But for a convert, I would not say you must, okay? Because I can't create an obligation that the law doesn't impose, right? But I can't say you must. I can say you should, right? But there are some Orthodox rabbis who would say no, you can't. Although in my experience, most Orthodox rabbis would say the same thing I do. If you feel that you should, then certainly go ahead. But again, because a convert is legally an entirely new person, right? If a brother and a sister both convert, they are no longer brother and sister, right? Which means, you see where I'm going with this, right? In legal, like black letter legal theory, they could marry each other and it's not incest, right? Because they are legally brand new people and not related to each other. No rabbi in the universe would allow that, right? Because that is like a classic example of Hilul Hashem, right? We're going to allow a brother and a sister to marry each other, right? No. Okay. So that even though, like, in pure legal theory, this would be perfectly acceptable, no, nobody would allow that, right? Because that, like I say, that's like a textbook definition of Chilul Hashem. Yeah, Alan.
When you lose a person in your family, it's a difficult time. Many different emotions, waves of grief, waves of other things. And if a religion is there to really help you and to get a sense of how to live in a proper manner, it needs to do things to comfort, in my opinion, that are not beyond the bounds of decency. I always go back to what Rabbi Dan Schiff said when we were lucky enough to hear him that time, and he talked about how Judaism will evolve, and that he can't say how it's going to evolve. I haven't read anything about him in a while. Maybe he figured it out now, but he can't say, but he knows that the seeds have been planted. And I believe that this is an area where it's worth talking about the seeds that have been planted. I think that halachically and all that is fine. And you're talking about law and you're talking about this is what must be done. It's not a strict liability crime. And I think that for, in just as a general principle, for Judaism to really move forward, the type of hat that you wear isn't determinative. It's the emotion, it's the help that you can bring to other people. You talk about Jews have a duty to speak up. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. The duty is because you want to better mankind. And it's the same thing here. And I realize that there are different striations and different groups in the Jewish, under the Jewish umbrella. But to
Right.
me, if we're going to really go forward in a positive manner, you need to keep in mind that people need help, especially if someone has passed on.
Right, for sure. And that's why I would again never say to somebody, whatever it is, you may not, right? I mean, all right, so the question of sitting Shiva for a non-Jewish parent um, is one that most Jews never face. And any Jew will face at a maximum twice in their life, right? But um, there are other situations that are, much more common, like um, a grandparent dies, an uncle dies, an aunt dies, right? A step parent dies, right? These are all relatives for whom we are not required to sit Shiva or say Kaddish. And historically, I'm thinking historically, not required means not permitted. Okay. Now, I would never say to anybody in that situation, not permitted. I would say now on the same thing, I can't create an obligation ex nihilo, right? And so I'm not going to say you must, but I would say you certainly may. You're not required, but you certainly may, right? Now, and this is a case really where no harm, no foul, right? Um, but somebody says to me, I want to go visit my parents' grave by myself and say Kaddish. Okay, well, again, I couldn't say to that person, no, you may not. Right? I mean, even if I did say you may not, well, am I going to follow them to the cemetery and make sure they don't and tackle them if they no, right? But you say Kaddish with a minion, right? There are prayers to say at the cemetery if
Mhm,
you are by yourself that are not the Kaddish.
mhm.
But if you say, well, but I don't know those prayers, they don't make sense, they don't speak to me, but I've always grown up, saying the fine, I'm not going to stop you. I mean, I am going to try to educate you, but I'm not going to try to stop you, right? So that's where, yeah, I mean, and I fully understand, like for me, right? For me, because I inhabit the system, halacha and spiritual satisfaction the overlap in the Venn diagram is very large. I won't say it's 100%, but it's very large, right? So that I have never said Kaddish for a grandparent, an uncle, a cousin, right? Even though they meant a lot to me. It's just, but if somebody finds that to be spiritually meaningful, I'm not going to try to stop them or tell them that they may not. Yeah, Leslie.
Well, I don't want to stop this conversation, but when you were talking about profaning the name of God, I was thinking of it in totally different terms. I was thinking of it as anything you do as, you know, that would reflect badly on Judaism. Like Jeffrey Epstein, Stephen Miller. I mean, in other words,
Yeah.
people who, you know, people may identify them as Jewish and yet they've done such terrible things. It's that to me would be profaning the name of God. Is that also what is meant by that?
Absolutely. I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, Stephen Miller is a walking Chilul Hashem,
Yeah.
right? He's absolutely a walking Chilul Hashem. And you know, I will tell you. I mean, I don't know if I'm even allowed to tell you, but I will. I mean, I mean, the first part I am allowed to tell you. I was appointed a week ago today. I was appointed to the resolutions committee of the Rabbinical Assembly, and apparently, like the resolutions process is that people submit a resolution and then the resolutions committee vets it and can edit it and whatever, and you know, then we can either choose to put it on the ballot, or if we don't want to put it on the ballot, or like we try to get the person who submitted it to make changes but they won't or whatever, then they can get it on the ballot by petition. Okay, if 50 members of the Rabbinical Assembly, it's not, then it gets on the ballot, even though the resolutions come in. And we have a resolution that was submitted to us that is a condemnation of Stephen Miller by name. Like I said, I was just appointed to the committee. I haven't even attended a meeting yet. My guess is that the leadership of the Rabbinical Assembly is going to be reluctant to pass a resolution condemning somebody by name. So I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, you know, I'm starting to understand the urban legend that, you know, of the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. But as far as I'm concerned, yes, he is absolutely a walking Chilul Hashem. And some of the things that are coming out about other people who were involved with Jeffrey Epstein, like, you know, Alan Dershowitz, who I once respected greatly, you know, Les Wexner, who has funded, you know, very worthwhile projects within the Jewish community, etc. So yes, that's absolutely, you know, Hilul Hashem. There's no question about it. Yeah. All right. So yeah. Sue, go ahead.
I was just wondering about, like, on a smaller level than that. I think you had mentioned one time that if you're shopping for a non-Jewish person and they want you to get some ham or some pork, that it would be okay because they're not being expected to keep kosher. But you wouldn't want to do that for somebody who's Jewish because even though they wouldn't be observant, you would be feeding into their lack of observance. So I'm wondering if you went to the store and you were an observant Jew and you were shopping for a disabled neighbor and you bought a package of ham and some other member of your synagogue comes along and sees you with the basket with the ham,
Right.
and doesn't ask you anything, if that's a bad reflection.
Well, I mean, look, if I were in that situation, I would wear a baseball cap rather than a kippah, and probably shop in a store that is not where I normally do my shopping so that I'm less likely to be recognized, right? But the flip side is that you also have an obligation not to think ill of a fellow Jew and not immediately jump to the conclusion that they're committing a sin. Right? I mean, especially in this day and age when we all have non Jewish friends and neighbors who could well turn to us for that kind of favor. Right? That's a good question. But I would say that you have an obligation to try and minimize the appearance of transgression as much as possible. And conversely, anybody who observes you has an obligation to give you the benefit of the doubt. All right, so let's go on to the B part of that statement. Right, unwittingly or wittingly, it is all one in profaning the name. Echad shogeg ve'echad mezid b'chilul Hashem. Okay, so the category of shogeg and mezid requires a little bit of unpacking. So shogeg is like an unintentional transgression. Mezid is an intentional or a knowing transgression. Okay, what does that mean? Shogeg, like an unwitting transgression, means that I was committing a transgression, but I didn't know that I was committing a transgression. Okay, now how is that possible? Either because like I did something that was forbidden, but I didn't know that it was forbidden. Okay. I mean, I'm trying to think. All right, so I take a nap on Saturday afternoon. Right, I take a nap on Saturday afternoon. I wake up. It's still Shabbat. I'm groggy. Um, I get up Saturday afternoon. I'm tired, whatever. I'm a little groggy, a little confused. I go downstairs. I brew myself a cup of coffee. Right? That is a shogeg because I didn't realize it was Shabbat. Right? I mean, I know that you're not allowed to brew coffee on Shabbat, but I didn't realize it was Shabbat. Okay, that's a shogeg, right? Another person might do the exact same thing, knowing that it's Shabbat, but so they know it's Shabbat, but it's still a shogeg for them. How? Because they don't actually know that it's not allowed to brew coffee on Shabbat, right? I mean, it's a question, right? You have that, like the specific facts matter, right? So that the action is the action, right? But the culpability depends on your level of knowledge, okay? Whereas a mazid is like, I know it's Shabbat. I know that it's not allowed to brew coffee on Shabbat, and I don't care, right? I'm going to do it anyway. That is a mazid, right? But when you are committing a Hilul Hashem, it doesn't matter whether it's shogeg or mazid. It's just as bad, right? Whereas in other cases, right, shogeg has a much lower level of culpability than mazid, right? Which is like when you're a rabbi, and I've discussed this with some of you, or maybe in classes before. That's something that you have to bear in mind. In other words, if there is something that many people in the congregation do, many people in the congregation do it, it's halakhically forbidden. They don't know that it's halakhically forbidden, right? So I get up on my soapbox and I say, I know that it is widespread, whatever. Okay, it doesn't matter. I know that this thing is widespread. I know that all of you who do this thing don't realize that it's halachically forbidden. I, as your rabbi, am telling you now, this is forbidden. Should I do that or should I not do that? Why or why not?
I know you said that you don't like to do that because then if we continue to do that, it's a more of a sin, or I don't know how you say it. But if
Right,
we don't know, then it's a minor sin or whatever.
Right, exactly, right? If you don't know that it's forbidden and you do it, it's a shogeg. If you know that it's forbidden, it's a mazid, and that's worse, right? So I have done you the great favor of changing your transgression from a minor one to a major one, right? That is if I assess, in other words, so it takes, you have to assess, like, again, the specific facts matter, right? Like if I say, oh, I know Leslie, right? And Leslie is constantly striving to increase her knowledge and her practice, right? So she would actually want to know. And once I taught her, she would actually change her practice, then I should do it, right? But if I say, she's going to keep doing it anyway, right? So that I shouldn't tell her. I really shouldn't tell her because then I have compounded her transgression, right? So you have to know, again, you have to know the facts and you have to know the person, right? So that it really matters. And so that, as a rabbi, you have to really sort of take these things into account. In other words, if you feel that you actually can change people's behavior for the better, you should do so. If you think, Gornish helfen, right? I mean, whatever, it's not going to make any difference. Then shut up. But it depends on it, I don't know. It depends on the circumstance. It's not simple, and it's not a straightforward yes or no. It really depends on the circumstances.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I did change because I didn't know you weren't supposed to make coffee. I mean, I didn't consider that. It didn't occur to me that that was cooking. But now what I do is I make hot chocolate because hot chocolate is the water has to be hot but not boiling. So
Right.
anyway,
Right. So it's right. It's not, I mean, making hot chocolate, as long as the water is not boiling or it's like in an urn or whatever, then right, making hot chocolate on Shabbat is not cooking in the same way that that coffee. I mean, there are ways to make coffee, but whatever. This isn't a class in the practical halachot of coffee making on Shabbat. All right. All right. We're not going to finish all of 5, but we can start in on it. All right. Rabbi Yishmael Beno Omer, Rabbi Yishmael, his son, that is the son of Yochanan ben Baroka, said. Now notice, right? Yishmael is his name, right? So you know, Jews and Muslims. Well, there were no Muslims yet, but anyway. Halomed Torah almanad lilamed must be keen biyado lilmod u lilamed. All right. If a person learns Torah in order to teach, it is granted to him. It doesn't really say by who, but by heaven, by the universe, by God. Right? If you learn Torah in order to teach, it is granted to you both to learn and to teach. Right? Like if you're learning so that you can teach, that's good, that's praiseworthy. You are granted by the universe, by God, the ability to both learn and to teach. The halomed almanat la'asot must be keen biyado lilmod ulilamed lishmor v'la'asot. If you learn in order to do, you are granted the ability to learn, to teach, to observe, and to do, right? Or to practice, right? So learning in order to teach is great. It is absolutely praiseworthy, right? That learning in order to not only teach but to actually do it yourself, right? That's like even better, right? You are granted the ability to learn, to teach, to observe, and to practice. Okay, so right, so that a teacher of Torah, right? I mean, if you are a teacher of Torah, you should teach Torah all the time, if necessary, using words, right? Right, that the way that you teach Torah is not just by frontal lectures and using words. Um, it's by how you live your life. That is the most important way that we teach, right? And so, like teaching frontally, verbally, that's great, right? Teaching by example, by how you live your life, that's even better, right? That's the optimum, and that connects to Chilul Hashem, right? That because all of us are called upon to be teachers, right? And if we live our lives, in ways that people look at us and say, these Jews, they've got it, right? They know what they're doing, and maybe I should be more like them, not just by our words, but by our actions, by the way, we live our lives. Then that's the optimal. Yeah. All right. Comments, questions, thoughts, rebuttals. All right. Great. Thank you, and good night, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Great.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah,